I feel God, bro.
If you don't write checks, how do you pay these guys?
Straight cash, homie.
I've never seen anything like that. I've been affiliated with the NFL for over 30 years.
We want the ball, we're going to score.
They are who we thought they were. And we let them off the hook. That's a W. Come locked in now, laser focus. Can't wait.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Optimistic Fan Club podcast. Big wildcard weekend recap. If you're a Browns fan, as per usual, we will cover the Browns last. Stick around. Let's watch all of these. Support the page and the podcast. I'm sure you'll find some interesting things to take in about it before covering that Browns heartbreaking loss. But before we get into it, I just want to mention something. So a couple weeks ago, actually more than a couple weeks ago, a couple months ago, I made a video for a show that I was considering doing called The Rec Room, where you go through and analyze why a particular receiver succeeds and whatnot. And the only episode that I ever did was on Puka because it was in the process of he was really starting to become a star in his early rookie career. And the entire basis of that video was on associating him and comparing him to Hines Ward. That was my take, that the way he ran block, the way he ran after the catch, his lack of typical explosiveness in the way that you would see like a Jamar Chase or Tyreek Hill. He didn't have that, but he had a different kind, that hard running, strong running, instinctual playmaking ability. So I made that video. I was like, Puka Nacua is Hines Ward. And then during the Rams game, which we'll cover first here, I see Daniel Jeremiah, DJ from Move the Sticks, like one of the biggest scouts on NFL Network, come out and say, oh, a friend just wrote me and they made a great comp. Puka Nacua's Hines Ward. And I was like, that was me. I said this months ago. So that's a sign right there. Stick around. Your boy knows ball. But let's just jump into that. Let's talk Rams versus Lions first. We're kind of going to go out of order here. Man, so my original Rams prediction was that the Rams were going to win at 27-24. We all know Lions win 24-23. Really great game, cool environment, super happy for Detroit fans. It feels a lot like Cleveland's 2020 win, where you go out there, kind of shock the world, break curses, move on to bigger and better things. But just Detroit played a really fantastic game, and they have such a great core, like Reynolds, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamar Gibbs, David Montgomery. You know, I was saying a lot about Jared Goff going into that game, saying like, if they lose, they're going to want to move forward and start considering drafting new quarterbacks because he might have a ceiling. And I still think we're going to have to see what that will be like if they can move on and get to like a cold weather outdoor game. If that becomes the scenario, then there will be a lot left to analyze there. But at this time, he played a fantastic game, took care of the ball, threw some great passes, got the ball to his playmakers, and just had a command of the game. So very happy for them. I think with Tampa, and we're going to do another preview podcast later this week, with Tampa, that's a different beast in a way because Baker is in a similar situation where he has a chip on his shoulder, a lot to prove. They have weapons, and they just had an emotional win against a team that was on the downslide and like seriously collapsing, but still they have momentum right now. So that'll wind up being a pretty fun matchup. But I want to touch on the Rams for a second. I think they are entering another window of Super Bowl contention with the young core that they built. And like Stafford is still such a baller. Like, he was knocked out cold on that hit. Everyone saw his eyes rolled in the back of his head, and he comes back out and continues to play. Matt Stafford is one of the great quarterbacks who is so unappreciated, even though, sorry, just going to move this forward. Even though he's won a Super Bowl, he just doesn't get talked about in the same way that a lot of his contemporaries do. And he's so talented. Puka Nakua is great. Cooper Kupp, I think, with another offseason, he's going to come in, be fully healthy, and have more of a return back to what he's been. Kyron Williams, like, if they can get the defensive side of the ball figured out a little bit more, I think the Rams are back in that Super Bowl contender window going forward, and they're going to be pretty scary for the next 2 to 3 years with that core, and Stafford still playing at a high level. So it's a very good game there, and it'll be interesting to see what Detroit can really do. Rooting for them as a Lake Erie team and whatnot, especially them being in the NFC, doesn't really conflict with much, but hats off to them. And you can just see, like, Dan Campbell is not an X's and O's wonderkin the same way Kyle Shanahan is in terms of him being a play caller and whatnot. But you can just see when you have belief and buy-in matched with consistency and toughness, that becomes pretty hard to beat. It doesn't really matter how advanced your play calling is, or even like how great your quarterback is, all of these things. When you just buy in and you're consistent and your coach echoes the core values of a team, the things that you're supposed to believe in, the effort you're supposed to give, the toughness you're supposed to play with, you can transform an organization overnight. And that is what they've done. Even though Dan Campbell is not, again, he's not like Shane Steichen or Jonathan Gannon in Arizona, who people are pretty high on after this year. He's just a leader, and he knows how to delegate. It'll be interesting to see, like, when Ben Johnson is gone, how great will they continue to be in terms of their offensive explosiveness. But they just believe, and they've created a culture there, like one that feels like a Ravens kind of culture, where they are tough. They're going to beat you down. They're going to be in every game for the most part. And if the players execute, the sky's the limit. So awesome job on their part. Now let's talk about Green Bay and Dallas. This was one that I said last week in last week's video. I predicted that Dallas would just squeak a win out 31-28. Green Bay winds up winning 48-32, and it wasn't that close whatsoever. And I said in that, I was like, this is the one game where I'm like, this is the most likely upset going into it, because Jordan Love is fantastic. December 2nd, I put the podcast out, and I had a whole section, you should go back and watch it, where I'm talking about like the willingness of especially talking heads to write a player off because they aren't exceptional immediately and they overlook their natural talent and gifts and ability to throw the ball. I was essentially just saying, like, that is so frustrating, and it's bad football analysis. You could see early on in the season the way the ball came out of Jordan Love's hand, exceptional, effortless. You can't replicate that. And it just comes down to, like, okay, make better decisions and you will be great. And we're seeing that in real time. What Green Bay has done is just continue to add explosive offensive pieces and give Jordan Love the time to fully emerge. And it happened in the back portion of the season. There were some rocky parts. I mentioned he had that great game against Detroit, but then had the loss against the Giants the next week or a couple weeks after, which kind of made people, second guess what they were seeing with their eyes. But Green Bay is as much of a threat as any team in the NFC in terms of matching up well against San Francisco. So that'll be very interesting to see. But Jordan Love, like, Green Bay has done it again. They have it really is the equivalent of the Steelers head coaching situation, where you go from Chuck Noll to Bill Cowher to Mike Tomlin. You win a Super Bowl with each one of those. Then you got Favre and Rodgers, both win Super Bowls in like that 30 plus year span. And now Jordan Love, who looks like he will be a contender over the rest of his career, especially with how young they are in Green Bay. And Matt LaFleur is a young guy. You're not going to get coordinator turnover when a guy leaves for another team, like they are set. So if you're a Green Bay fan, be very, very, very happy. And I'm really hoping to see them knock off San Francisco. I think that it would be very fun to see Green Bay, Jordan Love, make it to an NFC championship at least, because like they're legit. Like they are a real team. And Dallas, McCarthy's going to be gone. Earlier in the year, when I made my NFL predictions for records and whatever, I had Dallas only getting 9 wins. Obviously, they surpassed that, the number 2 seed. But I also said, like, this is, to me, Dak's last year, because he can't get over the hump. He doesn't have what Jordan Love has of like, okay, like he is a natural thrower. It's just easy for him. He doesn't have to have everything be perfect around him to succeed. He can work with young guys. And it's just fluid for him. Dak isn't quite that guy. And to me, if I'm a Dallas fan, you love Dak. You know, he's up there with all the all-time greats in terms of passing stats and regular season wins and whatever, but it's just not cutting it. And I think, you know, you can bring him back, but do you want to bring him back for like $47 million a year? Personally, if it plays out the way people think that it might plays out and you get Bill Belichick, I think you got to think to the future. You can have another chance, maybe whatever I don't even know if you could franchise tag him anymore, but maybe you run it back one more time, but you have to be thinking about the future because Dak's getting older. He has not shown that he can get over the hump, even with, you know, the CeeDee Lambs of the world, Jake Ferguson, who had a very good game, all things considered. Like, this team needs a great running back, not Tony Pollard, who's like more of a third down back than anything, a scat back. Like, they need a power run game. They need to retool the offensive line, and they need a head coach who can set a standard where you don't go into a game like that at home as the number 2 seed and just look woefully unprepared. It's just not acceptable. I don't think Jerry Jones is going to accept that. So McCarthy's going to be out, and the head coaching search is going to be on. And I don't know if that's Harbaugh. It kind of seems like Harbaugh is going to go to the Chargers. I don't know if it's Belichick. A lot of people seem to think that he's going to Atlanta, but I mean, if I'm Belichick as well, like, I want to coach Micah Parsons. He's been so vocal about like Lawrence Taylor. He loved coaching Lawrence Taylor, and Micah Parsons is the closest thing that he's seen to Lawrence Taylor. I think that on its own and working with that defense, that's going to be tough to pass up. I know that Atlanta has a great run game and a good nucleus of young players, but that's pretty big to go from, you know, it feels like LeBron going from Cleveland, where he wins a title, to LA, where it's just the biggest brand. If you could do that, finish your career with the biggest brand in football, man, that would be pretty cool to see. So we'll have to see, and we'll keep updated on that as the weeks go on and the coaching search goes on. But yeah, McCarthy's definitely out. Green Bay is ascending. And on that note, let's jump to the Chiefs and the Dolphins. My prediction was 24-21 for the Chiefs. Winds up being 26-7. And again, last week I said, if the receivers can turn it on, if they can just catch the ball, Kansas City could easily flip back into being a legitimate Super Bowl threat and favorite in the AFC. It kind of feels like that now. Rashee Rice, lighten it up, just catching the ball, running with it, doing the simple things. You got Isaiah Pacheco, Kelsey, couple drops, but looked healthier and like he was moving better, all things considered. And then you just have Mahomes, who's Patrick Mahomes. Fantastic stuff. And when they're playing at home, that defense can just stifle you, right? So this Chiefs-Bills game is going to be very interesting. It's going to be very even. It's 2 teams where expectations were extremely low relative to how those teams have performed in past seasons, but now they're just hitting their momentum at the right time. So it'll be that's going to be a very fun game to watch. But just the Dolphins, man. it's another situation, kind of like Dallas, where you have a lot of weapons, you got a lot of acclaim, success in the superficial stat lines that people like to see, so many offensive yards. Tua leads the league in passing yards. Tyreek Hill looks like he's on the pace to break the all-time receiving yards record in a season. And then it just comes crashing down when it comes time to play smash mouth football. Like, this is something that I always talk about and it's kind of what I was mentioning earlier with Detroit, where you might not necessarily be the best schemer or have the best game plan going into things, but you've just bought into the culture. And when it comes down to it, you're just doing the simple things better than the other guy, because it comes down largely to toughness and fundamentals. And it feels like Kansas City is extremely tough and fundamentally sound, and Miami has to use a lot of motions and tricks and gadgets. And this is something just relating to Browns fans, where Browns fans are like, we need to use more motion. Our offense is too stale. Blah, 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 blah. There's definitely some truth to that. And you want to see the offensive firepower of just like, let's get creative here. Let's get our best players isolated on their worst defenders, those sorts of things, but doing it in extravagant ways with orbit motions and returns and all of these things. When it comes down to it, and it's cold weather playoff football, the teams who can run the ball better, who can tackle more efficiently in the open field, and who can just make ballsy plays after the catch are the ones who wind up winning. And that comes down to player execution, belief in your coach and in the culture and in the plan, and just executing fundamentals. It's why the Patriots could take scrubs for all of those years and execute. And yes, you're probably screaming saying, it was Tom Brady. It was Tom Brady. Tom Brady did the fundamentals better than anybody. He wasn't the most gifted in any regard of his game, minus his preparation and his consistency with his fundamentals. And that was something that the Patriots defense always embodied. The Patriots run game always embodied. And Miami just doesn't have that. They're that flash of like all that speed, all that talent. But Tua, especially like that last 4th and 2, he's running around and trying to make a sidearm throw, rolling to his left while Tyreek Hill's running a slant that was open well before he threw the ball. And then it gets broken up last minute. It's like, execute the fundamentals, trust your teammates to block well for you so you can just make a standard one hitch throw on a slant. And it doesn't wind up happening. I think that Tua is better than the majority of quarterbacks in the NFL. But again, is he being put in the right position? Like, I just don't like going into that game with, I know Devin Achane is a fantastic young talent. His speed is immense, but it's like, when you can't win in the trenches, and maybe that's the warm weather thing, in cold weather in the playoffs, you can't run the ball to help your, somewhat limited quarterback. That's an issue. And all the speed in the world with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and all the other track stars you've put out there, like, it's not going to do anything because you can't get them the ball, because you're losing in the trenches. You can't, give Tua a break and get some chunk plays on run plays. It's just not sustainable. So I don't know. They have a lot to consider over there with Tua's future. So that'll be interesting to see play out, as all of these things are. Now let's go Eagles and Bucs. I picked the Eagles to win 20-17. Bucs blow them out 32-9. And this is another one of those takes, similar to the Puka Nacua is Hines Ward take that I had months back. This was again in that late November podcast that I did, where I was saying, like, I think Nick Sirianni is much closer to getting fired than to reaching another Super Bowl. And there were some whispers of that, but now it's like full force. Like, Nick Sirianni is getting fired. Or at least that's the way it feels. So I'm not trying to be like, oh, I called it, but I mean, that's another one I called. And why did I have that position? First of all, there was all those videos from last year where Nick Sirianni's getting in the camera. He's like, oh yeah. He's like pumping up the crowd, getting fired up. Jalen Hurts is having to reach over and be like, dude, relax. Your quarterback cannot be doing that to you if you're the head coach. You need to be more emotionally mature. You need to be more stable and locked in on the game. He's just like more of a cheerleader than anything. People would say that about Tomlin for all the time, being like, oh, Mike Tomlin is a cheerleader. It's like, he's not Nick Sirianni. Nick Sirianni's like a little kid when he's out there, and not in the good way where he's like freewheeling and like positive. He's disruptive. He erupts. It's the same thing with like what people are saying about Brian Dable right now, where he's just like looking for scapegoats. He's, after the Chiefs win earlier in the season where they only won because MVS drops that deep ball at the end of the game, and he's screaming like, oh, I don't hear anything now, Chiefs fans. That's ridiculous. I know, it's like, I know people like, because it's like an in vogue thing to be like, oh man, like he's disruptive. Like that's the history of everything, where people are like, man, like we like the players who are like, they're fiery and they play with a chip on their shoulder, or coach with a chip on your shoulder. Those people burn out the fastest. You want to know why Belichick has lasted so long, why Brady lasts so long, why Peyton Manning lasts so long? It's because they're calm demeanor, leveled out the whole way through. Even Josh Allen and Mahomes, they have moments where they're like, and the same thing with Brady. They get very excited, they're pumped up, but they leave it there and they move on to the next play. They don't just like carry themselves every snap with that mentality. And it's like, that's the thing with Nick Sirianni. He's way too immature. He's, to use a Colin Cowherd phrase, he's over his skis. You switch defensive coordinators as you're backsliding and put Matt Patricia in charge of calling the defense. I'm sorry. Without Bill Belichick hovering over his shoulder, what part of his resume would show that you are confident enough for him to turn things around? It was like a scapegoat moment where Nick Sirianni is saying like, okay, I have to act like a head coach now. We switched defensive coordinators in the back portion of the season when we're like 10-4 or at whatever point it was. It was just like, it's just a mark of an immature coach to me. So if I'm a Philly fan, I want to move on from Sirianni big time. I think a lot of people want to point to Jalen Hurts right now and say like he has to be better. Of course he does. He was very injured this year. That offense was extremely limited. When they had Shane Steichen, he was playing at an all-pro level, got to a Super Bowl, had an amazing game in the Super Bowl, minus his one freak fumble. So I think Hurts is a guy you want to roll with. I like his demeanor. I think the reason why he seems shut down is because he sees what this team is. He knows what it is. He sees the way Sirianni carries himself. He has his, Dallas Goedert on the sideline yelling at him yesterday, AJ Brown, all of these people being vocal, being upset with how it's going. It's like, I think Jalen Hurts is shut down because he understands like this team is not last year's team. This offense isn't the same. This defense is trash now. And we have a head coach who makes more headlines for saying and acting a stupid way because he likes the attention or whatever it is, or he's too fired up. We do more of that than like actually play fundamentally sound football and have an offense that scales with the season, that adds new wrinkles. It's like they're running essentially a high school offense. You've seen videos get put out in that way where it's like, oh, RPO, bubble, throw a deep shot to AJ Brown or Devontae Smith. It's like it kind of works because those players can outman you, but the core, the foundation of what that offense is not what it was like just a season ago. So a lot of retooling is going to have to happen in Philly, man. And I think depending on who you bring in, it's like maybe you're Super Bowl ready, but James Bradbury, Darius Slay, Kevin Byard, it's old. That's an old defensive back unit there that needs to be re-upped big time. Jason Kelsey's retiring. Who knows how much longer Lane Johnson has. DeAndre Swift's a free agent. They have a huge list of free agents. It's like basically their defensive line is solid, but even still, like that's being mostly bolstered by Jalen Carter being as young as he is, like Fletcher Cox is old. This team is going to take a backslide for a couple seasons, I think. And they had a chance to make another run this year with their youth and their talent. But man, so one more thing on the Philly and Tampa game that I didn't mention with all of that Eagle-centric coverage. We got to give Baker Mayfield his due. I said last week I thought that it would be a really close game and Baker would throw an interception in a key moment that would wind up losing them the game. He did not. He played fantastic and is just looking more comfortable and confident than he has in years. And a lot of Browns fans on Twitter want to be like, man, we should have kept Baker. Look at him. He wins a playoff game and the Browns lose theirs. That's crazy. It was never going to work out in Cleveland the way things were going. Baker needed being sent off to Carolina, losing that starting job, then going to LA and being with Sean McVay. It's like you can't compare those two outcomes and be like, man, if we kept him, it would have worked. We don't know that. You can't say that. We do not know that. I don't think it would have. I think he needed to rub shoulders with Sean McVay for a bit, feel confident again, and then go on a prove-it deal, a one-year deal in Tampa, and be with Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Cade Otton, Rachaad White, all those pieces. That's helped them. I mean, they played in a bit of a pillow fight division too in the NFC South, but regardless of that, Baker played a fantastic game, and I think going forward, man, who knows what will happen. Again, like I mentioned before, we're going to do a preview show and give predictions going into the Detroit game there as well, but just hats off to Baker. Super happy for him, and anyone who's been a Cleveland fan, it's like you'll always appreciate Baker for what he did, winning that playoff game against Pittsburgh, going to the divisional, almost winning against the Chiefs. He's better suited in Tampa than in Cleveland. It's just the reality of it. I don't think he would have got any farther than he did with Cleveland, especially with the way the Ravens are now. Even the Steelers are still competitive, and the Bengals with Joe Burrow. He's better suited for an NFC South type division. And again, super, super happy for him. I'll be rooting for him all through the playoffs. I mean, really, with the outcome of, either Detroit's winning or Baker and Tampa's winning, I like both of those teams. And, Goff and Baker, similar guys, were kind of like cast-offs. And I think that's a good transition point there with I don't think it would have worked in LA with Goff. Yes, they went to a Super Bowl. They lost. They saw their peak. I think he's better situated in Detroit, being that guy leading that franchise. It's very similar in a lot of ways. So you can't play the what if game. There's no confirmation in any of it. So good job on Baker and the Bucs there. But now let's talk about the Browns, those lovely, lovely Browns. And recap this game. So I thought it was going to be 31-24. Thought it was going to be tight. Thought Stroud was going to be going off the way he did. I thought, they're going to score at least 3 touchdowns in this game. And they did well over that. 14 of those points wound up coming from Flacco's arm to Houston. But overall, they just dominated. They played so much better than the Browns did. And let's uncover that a little bit. So, with all the videos throughout this year, this was Optimistic Fan Club. Prediction was 12-5 to go 11-6. I believe this team is very, very good. I didn't make any Super Bowl predictions, but after the Deshaun Watson injury, when I made that video in that hotel in Arizona that most of you guys watched, I said, this could be the 2015 Broncos. Regardless of who they bring in, if the defense can play at a historical level, both at home and on the road, this could be the 2015 Broncos. But they were not historically great. And my take, and I put this out, I don't know if everyone saw this, but I said a month and a half ago, the Browns defense is a lot like Miami's offense. Ton of firepower, can absolutely choke you out, smother you, knock you out of a game quick if you let them get on you quick. But when you face a good team who is well prepared and is equally as physical and as talented in skill positions, they can just let the levees break sometimes and completely become flooded. So I believed in the Browns' defensive talent, especially when they played at home, but just in terms of their execution, man, I thought that it was a lot of like what you see with the Dolphins, where it's like some of the best players at their position in the league play for those teams, but it doesn't come together all the time because it's like they don't do the fundamentals right. The same thing I was talking about with the Dolphins. They don't run block as well. They're smaller on the edges. They don't have a pounding running back like Mostert's really, really good, but he's still more of a track star than a bruiser in a game where you need a bruiser, like against the Chiefs in the cold. Browns are the same way. Not great open field tacklers, not super aggressive, coming down from the secondary to close. Newsome showed that he had improved in a lot of ways, but he didn't show up in terms of like run support moments. Same with Juan Thornhill. Delpit being out, he's kind of like the tone setter, like the banger in that secondary. He's out. He's not there to set the tone. Then you have Denzel Ward, who he'll always shut down his guy, and he's probably the most physical defensive back who's playing in that game. But there's only so much that he can do. I mean, he's trying to lock down their number one receiver. Then, Ronnie Hickman, undrafted free agent, you can't put too much on him. He looked really out of position in certain times, like especially on that the deep shot, I believe it was to Dalton Schultz, where he got sucked down on a crossing route. He's a young player. His eyes fooled him. They had a great game plan going into it. But overall, it's like all of the yardage, all of the big plays came on plays after the catch. And the defense was not physical enough. And this is what I think. And this is all before we get into the offense here. I think the biggest issue with the Browns defense is open field tackling and meanness in general. No one's mean enough. Other than JOK, you don't fear, as an opposing offensive player, you don't fear anyone on that team. Like with those great all-time defenses, which is what it would have taken for the Browns to win the Super Bowl this year. It's like you have a Ray Lewis, an Ed Reed, a Terrell Suggs, Haloti Ngata. You have that. Or you have like with the Broncos, like Aqib Talib, TJ Ward, former Brown, Danny Trevathan, Derek Wolfe as the defensive tackle, Von Miller. Like you have those guys who are like tone setters, guys who will make it tough on you all day long, every single snap. And then with the Browns, it's like you have JOK, who's mean. Like he is a dog. He's the definition of a dog. Plays with so much passion, heart, and soul. And then it's like with Delpit out, I don't know. With Garrett, he is like more of a diversion than anything. And I know a lot of people are upset. Like he had 1 sack in the last 7 weeks of the season, or whatever it was. He attracts enough attention where you need other people to jump in and help. But also, too, it's like I think the shoulder injury definitely affected him. But if we're being 100% real, and a lot of you will probably get mad at me for saying this is why Steelers fans are so adamant, and I know it's also because they're just being homers, why they're so adamant that TJ Watt is a better player. Because even still, with everything, even though I know he doesn't get as much attention in terms of like assigning players to block him and stop him, TJ Watt still brings an energy where it's like he's in the game even when he's not in it. And that's something that Myles Garrett needs to continue to work on, where and you saw him take a leadership step this year where he's like talking to the team beforehand, but there still feels like there's a lack of fire within him. And this isn't me quitting on those guys. I'd rather have Myles Garrett than TJ Watt. I would rather have, JOK than even like Roquan Smith. But there's a meanness that TJ Watt has that Myles Garrett lacks. There's a meanness that the role players on teams like the Ravens and the Steelers have that are so much more aggressive and mean and angry and tough and gritty than a lot of the role players on the Browns defense has. And I think like Obo Okoronkwo, he's that kind of guy, like spark plug, crazy effort, tough. JOK, Grant Delpit, Denzel Ward, and then Garrett he's just great no matter what. You have those 5 guys, but it's like you need to build everything around JOK going forward. You need to get him a running mate at linebacker. Taki, for what he is, for where he was picked, he's really solid. He is not like a Super Bowl winning talent linebacker who is going to punish people the way that like a Navarro Bowman and Patrick Willis did. And I know you're talking about two, Willis being an all-time great, Bowman being like just on the edge of that conversation. That's tough to find, but you have to prioritize that. JOK is fantastic. He's going to keep ascending, but we need someone else. We need someone else to be a punisher with him. And whatever that looks like, that would be my priority. My priority. Being a meaner, tougher team, becoming more of an AFC North team, like punishing defense, not just great statistically and like, oh, we have a lot of pass breakups. It's like, no, this team needs to lead the league in sacks or be top 3. This team needs to punish people. They need to be the best open field tacklers in the league. If you want to ride with your defense being your calling card as a team, like a lot of people made the Browns out to be this year, which to me, it was like when people were like, fire Stefanski. All of the offensives or all of the team success that was found this year was because they brought in Jim Schwartz. Okay, well, look at that and tell me how wrong you obviously are in that scenario. Stefanski is a really good coach. Schwartz was not ready for this game. The offense honestly was for the most part until Flacco started gifting the ball away, which we're about to get to. But just to say, it's like Schwartz still has a lot of growth to do. This defense has a lot of growth to do, and it all hinges on being more fundamentally sound and meaner and imposing your will and not looking at these hollow stats of like, oh, well, we allowed the least yards. It's like when all of the national media was like, man, the Browns are like a historically great defense. I'm sorry. If you actually watch those games, and this is me being 100% realistic. I thought there were times where the Browns had the best defense in the league. Absolutely. But as a whole, I mean, I said it early in the year, and again, you might get mad at me. I'm not going to be a homer and lie. It's like the Ravens had the better defense. They were way tougher, way more explosive. The Browns, like, they just aren't mean enough. And that's, to me, what you have to be. If you're going to be like a ground and pound team on offense in a lot of ways, once Chubb is back, you have to be hammering guys. Mean, tough, nasty, gritty. That is what is needed on defense. And those are the kind of guys who I would be bringing in, not like this, oh, pat a guy in the back. Oh, great run there, buddy. I tackled you. It's like, no, like I want punishers. So I'll stop on that because I know I kind of keep repeating myself. But now let's talk about the offense. So Browns offense started out hot. Cooper clearly injured. Limited there. David Njoku made some great plays, dropped a couple balls. Flacco looked solid to start. It was just a matter of time, man. If he would have been able to keep stringing it together, this team would have been like probably the greatest sports story of all time for Flacco to come in and do this. And like, it was always possible, but it wasn't super realistic. So I don't hold anything against Flacco. I thought it's like that is what he was, even when he was playing with the Browns. It was just they were playing teams who couldn't maximize off of the turnovers that he was creating. And I said to a friend who was asking me like, oh, do you think the Browns win? I'm like, if Flacco turns the ball over more than once, it's basically a wash. And it's like that was predicated on the belief that it's like, oh, he'll throw an interception, they'll get tackled, and then the defense will have a chance to stop them. But it's like, no, it's like you gifted 2 touchdowns. You can't overcome that, man. And it just wasn't the Browns' year. It was not. I believed it was possible. It was possible. They were in the dance. They had their ticket, but it was just like, is Joe Flacco going to turn the ball over? Unfortunately, he did. And now it's like that leaves a lot to be answered. And we are going to do the Browns exit meetings. We're going to talk about everything, every position, the coaches, everything. Look at contracts, cap space going into next year. So look out for that in the next like week or two. That'll be coming out. So we're going to talk more about the Watson versus Flacco thing, but this is just one of those things where it's like, I'll say this now and we'll talk about it more later. We want to look at Flacco and say like, man, like we've never had a quarterback who made it look that easy or who passed for 300 yards 4 games in a row, multiple touchdowns. Guys, he threw so many interceptions during that time too. And even if you look at the Bears game, like that throw to Amari Cooper was amazing. That play was amazing. That game was amazing. Even the throw he made to Njoku later on like the 3rd and 12. You got to call it what it is. That throw to Amari Cooper in that Bears game is this far away from being an interception. And it very well could have been. And they could have lost that game. And you'd have a totally different perception. Also, the passing stats are so high in those games because without Deshaun Watson in the game or a DTR, the run game was completely dead because without Chubb, if it's Flacco handing off to Chubb, you're still going to have a viable run game. However, when you have Jerome Ford and you're trying to run the ball and pound the ball, you're not going to be able to do it the same. So you have to lean on the arm of Flacco. Like people are being like, man, they're going to have to rein in Flacco. They sure are throwing a lot. It's like, because they couldn't run. They can't run the ball without Nick Chubb or without a dual threat quarterback being in there to threaten like on read options, all those things, bootlegs, where it's like you have to respect the quarterback moving as well and pull defenders out of the box. It's like, it's very tough because it's like Cleveland fans get attached because like, man, and that was like the most fun season ever. It truly was. It truly was. But you can't have like this attachment to people whose ceiling was clearly met this year. And it was. People got more tape on him. They figured out how to stop him. And he just makes bad decisions. And that's why he was a backup. It's why he didn't get a starting job for so long. Like, there's reasons why guys are sitting on the couch. And I think it's a testament to how good of a coach Stefanski is and Alex Van Pelt is to get him ready and produce at that level. But like, it was always kind of a 50-50 chance. And man, I think you squeeze the last drops out of Flacco. And again, in that next video, we're going to talk about, do you bring him back as a backup and whatnot? But it's like what you saw Deshaun Watson do against the Ravens in that second half, he was starting to ascend. The same way Jordan Love struggled a lot early in the year, he was starting to ascend. So that is the guy moving forward. Again, we will talk about it, but just some final thoughts on the Brown besides lacking meanness, fundamentals on defense in terms of open field tackling. This team needs to retool the running back position. Someone to go with Nick Chubb and a succession plan because he's turning 29 next year. Jerome Ford is not it. You need a bigger, bruising, tough, explosive back. And you need playmaking wide receivers. Amari Cooper, very solid, had a career year this year. He is limited. He is limited in what he can do after the catch as well. And that is what you're seeing. All of these teams who are succeeding right now. It's like, look at Tampa Bay last night. Whoever, I forget the receiver's name, but the rookie who they drafted takes like a slant from Baker, breaks 3 tackles and goes 50 yards to the house. That is what Cleveland needs, man. Playmaking guys who can just catch the ball, but then do something with it after. We have a lot of guys right now who catch the ball and get 3-4 yards. Like, I don't know what the most explosive play after the catch was all year. It was probably like a lot of David Njoku plays in the last 4 games of the season where you're like catching them on the run, but it's like, you can't have that. The tight end can't be the answer for yak yardage. So that is a big point of emphasis, I believe. And again, getting a running mate for JOK, getting overall meaner. But let's touch on Houston. CJ Stroud, fantastic. Like, just what a great game. What a good kid. You know, a lot of people love him from Ohio State. I really thought that Anthony Richardson was going to be the best quarterback from this draft, but CJ Stroud has just elevated in every way and just looks confident and in command. Nico Collins, great young player. Devin Singletary, an explosive back, great free agency pickup. And Houston is a threat. And this is the thing with the AFC now. You have threats in every division with great quarterbacks and great young pieces. It's like for the Browns, man, you have to get playmakers. You have to find like the players that Baltimore finds, like Keaton Mitchell, the Rams, Puka Nakua, Houston, Tank Dell, Nico Collins from a couple years ago. There's all of the Green Bay, Christian Watson, Romeo Dobbs, and 13. The name's slipping me right now, but led rookies in touchdown catches. You have to start drafting playmakers. It's like, I forget who said it this weekend, but it's a very famous statement. It's like, it's not X's and O's, it's Jimmys and Joes. That's what it comes down to, man. Players who can execute when the play comes their way and do something exceptional with the ball in their hands after the catch. So, you know, I don't know how much longer Amari Cooper has. We're going to touch on this in this next video. I promise that's the last time I'm going to say this. But Houston, great young core. Defense played a lot better. And the Browns, man, just like amazing season. All things considered, everyone thought the season was over after Chubb. Everyone thought the season was over after Watson. Everyone thought the season was over after, you know, DTR gets injured against the Broncos. And then Flacco goes in on this run. It was just a great season overall. And just this team is headed in the right direction. They just need to re-up the troops. And I believe that they'll get there. But on that note, we've probably rambled long enough here. We're going to do another podcast later this week previewing all of the divisional round games. So if you guys are enjoying, please share this with a friend. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Links are down below in the bio. And really looking forward to this off season. Got a ton of new things coming on the channel and some different things as well. I posted this to Twitter yesterday, and this is, I guess, if you're listening at this point, you get the sneak preview on what's coming next. But I'm going to be doing this year, one of my New Year's resolutions. I've wanted to dunk a basketball my whole life. I've been able to do it with a tennis ball, with a soccer ball, but never with a basketball. And that was years ago, like when I was still playing college football and like when I had just finished. But now it's been quite some time. I just turned 28 in December. My knees hurt. I've put weight on and I want to enjoy my athletic prime. So this year we're doing a whole video series on like my journey to dunking a basketball. I think it's going to be really fun, but we will have tons of NFL stuff. We're going to get a lot more into like talking about leadership and organizational relevancy and what are the habits of great teams and head coaches and players. A lot of stuff like that, not just these bland video essays that every NFL channel does. We're actually trying to do something a lot different here that actually provides value and that you can take. And like the whole idea of the Optimistic Fan Club, it's not just about the Browns or like any team in particular. It's about belief in the process, in committing yourself to one thing and seeing it come to fruition, not being fake optimistic, but being like realistic and seeing beyond what's in front of you right now. So that's what I'm really trying to get to, and the greater purpose of all of this, I guess. So thank you guys so much for listening and supporting. We're going to have our final Browns video, like I mentioned, with the exit meetings coming out soon. And it was such a fun year. Guys, don't be down. Don't be pessimistic about the state of the Browns in particular. A lot of great things are going to come, and there's still a 3 to 4 year window. But again, we will talk about that. So thank you so much. We'll see you in the next one.